Hey, low friction peeps, welcome back. Yeah, I'm just ducking back quickly this week for a couple of quick topics that came up during the week. One, there've been a couple of good questions with regards to use of Silca's strip chip yet again. So, strip chip's a funny one in that on the surface it's a really easy way to, sort of as they market, one step, degreasing of your chain and waxing. However, there are still some little ins and outs which we need to sort of clarify and get some, instructions sorted to ensure it is done as it should be. So, yeah, I'll run through a couple of quick bits that have come up during the week. The other is I've also been getting an increasing number of inquiries around the zero friction cycling test data, and I have done little spots on that in the past, and Silca also attempted to do a short video on understanding the ZFC test data. I'm going to see if I can do the best, most concise one yet, just to cover this topic off. So that way when I get email questions about it, I can just send a video link through and send people there. And hopefully, if you didn't understand what the data tables meant, what the percentages mean, what the red blocks mean, I've covered the test protocol fairly thoroughly in the past and the test brief. So I'll see if I can do a good job with just the data that we get from the test today without taking a bajillion years and words. See how we go. Alrighty, Silca strip chip questions and clarifications number, I am not sure. I feel like I've done a number of little updates on strip chip to date, and we're still going. A couple that we're going to go through today, they have been sent off to Josh. I'll hopefully have an answer back by next week, and I might do another quick update if I get the answers to that then. But let's have a look. Really at the end of all of this, I will put together, a Silca strip chip instructions document and vid from the ZFC side. Silca have their own. They have multiple of their own, including FAQ videos. So I feel, though, that I'd like to consolidate my own as well, just so that those using the products get it in the ZFC version, which is generally going to be the, hopefully you really can't go wrong because I cover off everything version. Alright, firstly, the fancy temp control pot. A fellow raised a really good point during the week that, you set the temperature to the required 125 degrees. But from the point where the wax melts, which is going to be really somewhere around 60 degrees Celsius, it's just melted. The display will show 125 because that's what you've set it to. But you don't really know when it has attained that 125 degrees temperature. And the instructions re-strip chip are that really it needs 10 minutes at 125 degrees for the strip chip to do its thing in converting the factory grease to wax. So I took a bit of a stab at one I was doing this morning, just from sort of when it melted to when I thought it's probably going to be at the 125 degree temp. And I was a little bit out. It was basically at 105 degrees. So had I put the strip chip and the chain in then, I would have been, notably under where I needed to be. Now, how long it takes to get to 125, really it's going to depend on a few factors. So ambient temperature, it's going to be different in a 25 degree room versus if it's in quite a cold shed or garage during winter. The fill level of the pot can really take sort of anywhere between about sort of 200 to 350, 400 grams of wax. So if you've got double the amount of wax, and I had on the lower amount, I've got 200 grams in there, and it still took longer than I thought it would. So if you've got more from the time it's melted to the time it actually gets to 125, you may well underestimate that. And without it showing the actual temperature, you don't know. So it's still, even with a temp control pot, potentially something that, some may want to look at a digital thermometer, or, and the instructions that we'll have from ZFC will be to basically give it a solid amount of time after it has melted. So we'll either be saying, look, give it, say, 40 minutes from when you turn it on, or 20 minutes at least from when it's melted, to ensure that it is at the 125 degrees Celsius before you put your strip chip in. So at this point, it's not really limited to the fancy silca pot. I've got a couple of other temperature control instant pots that I use as well, and normally I will set them to 90 degrees just for normal waxing. But I'm not really too fussed, obviously, if it's at 90 degrees or if it's 75 or 80 at the time I do the waxing. It's going to do a waxing perfectly fine within those temperatures. But I'm not doing strip chip, which is, pretty super keen on ensuring that we have that at 125 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. So it's rather more important that we have it at that specified temperature for the magic to happen. So yeah, it's something that I've sort of flagged to Josh and wanted to get his input on that. But because I haven't seen in any of the videos, at this point being covered off, it has just been that you set it to 125 degrees Celsius and you wax your chain with the strip chip at 125 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. But I fear that people will get caught out at a much lower actual temperature because it just shows 125, whether it's at 80 degrees or 100 degrees or anything in the range after it's melted. You just don't know unless you have given it a solid block of time to ensure, or you're using a thermometer. All right, now the next part is directly linked to this with just regards to, I guess, the importance of the 125 degrees for 10 minutes. The workshop in the morning is not heated, so the ambient temperature was 15 degrees Celsius this morning, which obviously means the chain was 15 degrees Celsius. So I put that into the 125 degree wax with strip chip melted in it. And that dropped the temperature of the wax in the pot from 125 all the way down to 105. It took nearly 10 minutes with the lid back on for the pot to bring that back up to from 105 to 125. So this could be an issue, and it could lead to something that I've sort of then gone and double checked with my first chain that I strip chipped. So whether or not, we really need to give it 10 more minutes after we have given it the 10 minutes is something that I have asked Josh because, putting it in and just giving it 10 minutes, as he states, it's not 10 minutes at 125 that you are getting. It's going to be obviously well under that. So last week I advised I'd done my first strip chip and all seemed groovy. I hadn't had time to ride that chain, so I managed to get out on that bike and give it a good run in. Having, inspecting that chain and chain wax versus one that I've just done with the extra 10 minutes to factor in the drop in temp that putting the chain in actually gives it. If I was in a blind test, I'm pretty confident that I could tell the difference between the wax that was just strip chipped for 10 minutes, so my first one. I can feel that wax is a little bit tacky. It's not, really, I guess something that you would go, wow, that's some obviously sort of factory grease tacky wax. It's very slightly tacky. Whereas the one that I have done, giving it the extra 10 minutes this morning, I've broken that in. I've given it a run on my just one of my machines just to break it in, and the wax feels very dry. So yeah, I think there is a difference between putting a chain in after you have heated your wax to 125 as per instructions, put your strip chip in and melted, but putting the chain in can potentially really drop that temperature down. And that just may not give us the time and at the temp needed for that magic to happen. So yeah, I'm confident I could spot the difference between a chain that's been waxed for as per the original instructions versus a chain that has been given the extra 10 minutes. So that's something. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully I'll get a response back from Josh during the week. And if yes, I'll try to get a quick vid update on this one again next week. So just to wrap the previous 10 minutes of unscripted thoughts on this update. A really good point raised by a follower during the week that the pot's not telling you the actual temperature, and that after it has melted, you really don't know what temperature it is unless you're using a thermometer. So give it a good block of time to ensure that your wax is at 125 before you start doing the strip chip process. And the instructions from Silca, where they say that you then give it 10 minutes, That's assuming 10 minutes at 125, but your chain is going to drop that temperature. Obviously, again, how much it drops, it may not be as much as mine. It's going to depend on how cold your chain is, and it's going to depend on if you have, say, 200 mil of wax at 125 degrees or 400 mil of wax at 125 degrees. Either way, it will drop it. I would give it at least an extra 5, likely an extra 10 minutes, for a total of 20 minutes after you have put the chain in with the strip chip, as opposed to just the silk instructions of 10 minutes. We'll get hopefully further thoughts from Josh with luck during the week, but that would be personally what I would be doing. I have done a chain for a friend who I'm going to be dropping off to tomorrow. So I've done another strip chip, and that is the process that I have followed to ensure that it is fully strip chipped. Alrighty, understanding the zero friction cycling test data. I'm going to try to just give myself 15 minutes only to lead you to a place of great clarity and understanding. Let's see how we go. Okay, part 1. I'm not going to go much at all into what the actual test protocol is in that. I have a full test brief document in the instructions tab where you can go through the test block by block, understanding what the correlations are for the ZFC test and performance. We're just going to get to the part where we're understanding what the physical data figures mean in the data sheet. So to that end, you may have heard, I guess, 0.5% as the recommended replacement mark for your chain to ensure that you are not then excessively wearing your cassette and chain rings. That 0.5% is basically if you take a chain that's new, we call that, obviously it's 0% worn. Once a chain has been worn to a point where it is 0.5% longer than it was from new, so not 5%, but 0.5%, then that is the recommended replacement mark or wear mark for that chain. So there's not a lot of wear tolerance there. And the reason why it's quite small is that beyond that tolerance, the chain is going to start rapidly eating into the teeth on your cassette and chain rings. And so you run a chain past 0.5%, you could cost yourself a lot of money in replacing, a cassette that you wouldn't have needed to replace if you had, moved your chain on before or by that 0.5% mark. And also you're going to make some pretty sturdy inroads into your chain rings and so on as well, which if you have to replace both your cassette and chain rings at the same time as you get a new chain, simply because you ran that chain long, that can really, really hurt. And so an accurate chain wear checker and actually using that regularly, that's just one of the simplest, best things you can do for your wallet in cycling and give you lots of money to buy other fun stuff as opposed to having to replace expensive bits that didn't or otherwise wouldn't have needed replacing. So for the zero friction cycling test, which is a wear correlation test, we're not trying to measure outright efficiency because that is currently a basket case. We are using the correlation that a lubricant eating through the steel parts of your chain at a rapid rate is not low friction running. We are using that same, wear replacement mark as our end of test mark. So 0.5% wear equals 100% in the zero friction cycling test data. So if you see in the cumulative wear, a chain is at 100%, that means it has used 100% of the test wear allowance, which is 0.5% elongation wear. If we were to see a chain that was at a result and it says 150%, then that means we have used up 150% of that wear allowance. So the chain would effectively be at, say, 0.75% wear. If it was a 200% mark in the data block, then that's going to be 1% wear. And if it's at 50%, then it's going to be only half of that 0.5% wear allowance. The chain would be at 0.25% wear. Hopefully that makes sense, and let's go have a look at some of the data so we can see that in action. On the main test data page, we've got two main sections really. So one is the cumulative wear across the test blocks. So from block 1 all the way through to block 6. And then we have the individual wear by block. So these are not cumulative. It just enables us to look at that data for just that block raw, so that if we want to sort of drill down on what is performing best in, say, just dry dust conditions or wet contamination conditions. We can do that without having to do any, subtraction of a number from a previous block. So yeah, I'll cover off also just the red blocks denote extrapolated data. So in general, I have a pretty hard stop on once a chain has exceeded its 0.5% wear allowance, which is represented by over 100% of the test allowance here. Then the test will normally stop at that point. I don't push on, and I will move to using extrapolated data. There's a couple of main reasons for that. One, I need the test machine time to move on to the next lubricant, and two, if a lubricant starts to perform really poorly, especially in the wet contamination blocks, where by a certain point in the interval that the lubrication is it's done. It's not handling it at all. It's getting really high wear and high friction, and the links are really starting to stiffen up. There were some cases in the earlier days where I did try to push things on that, we get really bad chain suck, and a couple of instances of where mech hangers broke because the chain suck was continually so bad, and also a couple of cases of chains just being dragged up around the chain ring and bottom bracket. And that just fudges a whole bunch of stuff. So, again, it's driven by a motor, so it doesn't know to stop pedaling. Now, the use of extrapolated data, it's not just guesswork. If it has extrapolated data, it is, if anything, quite generous to the lubricant that has had its test stopped early and moving to that. Basically, what I do is I look at all the lubricants, and it's broken down into wet lubricants and wax lubricants, or wax strip, because they can perform or extrapolate rather differently. So we'll look at lubricants, all of the ones that have been tested through to the end of block 4 and block 5. I can have a look at what the average difference is between, say, block 2 and block 4. So for instance, if I have a look at wet lubricants, the average for or wear rate for wet lubricants through block 2 is 38.4%. The average of those lubricants that made it all the way through to the end of block 4 is 49.6%. So there's an 11.2% difference between those products that made it through that far. I'm able to use that extrapolation so that a lubricant that ended up being, stopped being tested at the end of block 2 will have, at the end of the day, a generous extrapolation derived from lubricants that perform much better than it applied to it for its block 4 result, and similarly the difference between block 2 and block 3, and away we go. So extrapolated data, especially if that is starting quite early, so for lubricants that have really only made it to the end of, say, block 2 or the end of block 3, that's it's a poor performing product. And from that point, they're having what is, at the end of the day, fairly generous extrapolation data applied to them from that point. So even though the figures look rather horrendous, because they are terrible products, it likely, had I actually dared to try to continue the test through all the way to the end, I would be very confident that the results would be even worse. And, for a number of them, I would have, again, destroyed mech hangers, damaged bottom brackets and couplings, and all sorts of fun. Alright, let's just have a quick look at how, this wear correlation works in reality. If I'll go down to the wear by block, smallest to largest, let's have a look at some lubricants that have, in clean block 1. So this is obviously a perfectly stripped clean chain. The chains are cleaned of the factory grease via the ultrasonics. So it's all up to the lubricant going on. The lubricant is applied as per the manufacturer instructions. Normally, especially for, if we look at, say, wet lubricants generally do not pose any concerns with regards to initial penetration. They're wet. They're going to run through the link. Really no issues. Wax strip lubricants, some of them do present that. So block 1 to block 2 results can sometimes be a little bit, need a little bit more depth to understand. For wet lubricants, though, for today's purposes, it's pretty easy. Let's, if we have a look at a couple that had similar-ish results in block 1. So let's say Shield T9, that was 11.1% in block 1. And let's have a look at, say, Muck Off Ludicrous AF, which is their very expensive top-of-the-line lubricant at 8.9%. So the Muck Off Ludicrous AF has outperformed the Boeshield T9 by sort of a couple of percent in that clean block 1. But then if we have a look at the block 2 wear rate result, we can see that, so once we've started to add some dry contamination, the Boeshield wear rate increased to 32% for that block, or 32.3%. So a fairly decent jump versus clean block 1. Had I kept, if I was not adding contamination, block 2 would come out extremely similarly to block 1, obviously. But we can see the Muck Off has jumped all the way up to 78% just for that block 2. So, it's a good, what is that, sort of 40+%, around 45% greater amount of wear, over double the amount of wear than the Ludicrous AF just through that block 2. The wear rate increase is, in block 2 is very obviously due to the dry contamination. So what it's showing is that the lubricant has absorbed the contamination that has been applied and given it a pathway to move from outside the chain to inside the chain, where it can cause a lot more friction and wear to the main load parts of the chain, resulting in elongation wear that's very easily measured. So, if one was to go out on a nice big gravel ride or race, you can sort of probably start to decide on what lubricants likely to remain very low friction and which lubricants are going to become a basically liquid bastard file. So really looking at the top of the tables, so if I sort it by block 2, we can see the immersive waxes are going great guns. Also, so are the top wax strip lubricants. Wax lubricants in the world of dirt and dust just have a lot of rather key advantages over wet, which is just going to have all particles of dust stick on contact, and wet lubricants provide a nice pathway for them to migrate from outside to in, whereas solid or semi-solid wax coating, any dust that sticks on the outside has a really tough time getting from outside to deep inside the chain, where it's going to cause frictional wear damage. Which is why I'm always banging on about how, if you ride off-road, wet lubricants really are not the choice for you, despite what claims of detergent and cleaning that they may do. They really just do not hold up well. So really, it's just as simple as that. The two parts you get to you can rank the lubricant by. I use up to block 5 as the cost to run. The extreme block is kind of it's so extreme that it can faff with some products a bit, so I don't use that in the cost to run modeling and so on. But sorting either by the end of block 4 or block 5 or even block 6, you can easily see what are the highest performing lubricants in the zero friction cycling test, which is a really hard test. It's a test that goes for, at the end of the day, if it goes all the way through to the end of block 6, that's 6,000 kilometers of testing with dry contamination and wet contamination and an extreme contamination block. There is no other testing like that, that's putting lubricants through the ringer. Really, pretty much all other testing is clean lab based and runs for typically between 4 and 13 hours, as opposed to 6,000 kilometers, and can take up to 6 weeks or a couple of months for some products to get through. And general rule of thumb is pretty much, really anywhere, any lubricant in sort of around the top 15, where you don't need to be stuck on the immersive wax train and think that it's immersive waxing or bust with regards to the best friction. They do have advantages. They're not for everybody. If you pick something in at least even if it's in the top half of the league table here, you're going to be on something that is at least decent to excellent, as opposed to something that is, either fairly average to poor to liquid bastard files. So aside from that though, if your riding is of a specific demographic, like you are mostly gravel or mountain bike, most of your riding's in the dry, so really the dry dust contamination block 2 is going to be the performance that you would really most want to focus in on, as opposed to the main cumulative wear. You can just see the wear in that particular block, which is basically all the riding that you're doing. If you ride a lot in wet contamination or really harsh conditions, then honing in on block 4 and block 6 only would really be sort of where I would look, as opposed to the cumulative wear, because that you want the lubricant that's really performing the best for the type of riding that you do. So all that's just nice and easy and obtainable and sorted via the little drop downs for you on that main data. And just for your type of riding, pick something in the top 15 or at least top 20, and you are ensured that you are on a decent to excellent product. Alrighty, just quickly moving on to the single application longevity testing data. This area is a bit tricky. The testing is a bit tricky, and what we're getting from it is it's still something that we have to manually factor a few things. But just from understanding what's going on here, I guess your most important point to understand is what does this mean by jump point, and what are we meaning by kilometers to the wear allowance? So the jump point is basically denoting when we saw a significant jump in the wear from one check measure to the next. The check measures in the single application longevity test are quite frequent. They're every 150 kilometers, so it's basically 100 kilometers on the big ring, 50 kilometers on the small ring. And yeah, we can pick up, so normally obviously from the start you'll have a very low wear measure from the start to the 150 kilometer mark, and then it should be a very low wear measure from 150 to 300 and so on. But at some point there's going to be a jump in that wear rate, at least for most lubricants, and that jump is going to signify that the lubricant treatment is effectively done. It's obviously no longer lubricating well if there's been a notable increase in the wear rate from one measure to another. So quite often there's going to be wear rate allowance left for the test, but that's kind of a bit irrelevant. It's really the jump point that we're looking for. Now, it's also worth noting that the wear allowance for the single application longevity test is 0.1%, not 0.5%. It would be a bit nuts to just apply a lubricant once and then run it all the way through to basically 100% wear of the chain. So we're using basically 20% wear of the chain, which is still plenty to have ascertained that yes, that lubricant treatment is done. Now that can, I guess, any differences between the actual reaching the wear rate allowance and reaching the jump point, it can vary a bit often by sort of lubricant type. I guess most stereotypically, lubricants will, or wet lubricants will just show a small increase in wear from one check measure to the next, all the way through to the wear allowance. It can be a slight increase. So initially, for instance, the first check measure, it might show a 1% wear, and then the next check measure, it might show a 1.1% wear, and then the next one, it's at 1.5% wear. And towards the end, each check measure might be showing 2.5 to 3% wear. Whereas some of the wax lubricants, waxes can tend sometimes to be, they're outstanding, showing basically like 0 wear, 0 wear, 0 wear, or extremely close to, and then all of a sudden, there's like a 10% wear recorded. So wax lubricants sort of can behave differently in that they are amazing until the treatment is done, and then there's a significant ramp up once that occurs. And so that can then be sort of detected as you look through the results. There are still, I guess it's all sorts of fun trying to relate machine kilometers to real world kilometers. For a start, a machine doesn't pedal like you pedal. A machine is quite smooth. It just zooms around at 250 watt load. Pedaling has sinusoidal loading, so you have much greater peak forces at 250 watts than the machine does. And typically your pedaling, if you were to average 250 watts and a machine is going to average 250 watts, your pedaling at 250 watts will go through a lubricant treatment much faster than a machine would. And then obviously there's a bajillion different environmental factors to take into account, and different types of sessions. People are doing high intensity sessions and so on, which will wear through lubricants faster than just steady state zone 1, zone 2 cycling. So, we can't factor your type of cycling. We can't factor differing contamination levels and type and how abrasive that type is and all that sort of stuff. So you have to take these figures that you think you may be able to get for a lubricant treatment with a pretty big grain of salt, and get to know your lubricant choice yourself as to how long that is lasting before you should re-lube. Typically, giveaways are your chain is starting to sound and feel dry, and some lubricants do, because of the additives and just being high performing lubricants, they can protect the chain from wear for a impressive amount of time after it does start to sound and feel dry. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be pleasurable to ride these products, sort of anywhere near to the kilometre marks that we're achieving on the league tables. So really, once you have a chain that's starting to sound and feel dry, that really is your hint that you should be now looking to re-lube or re-wax, not continue on to some big impressive number because the zero friction cycling single application longevity table said that it's fine to go to 1,000 or 3,000 kilometres. Alright, so whilst there are difficulties in trying to rate treatment lifespan, and same with the main test data table, obviously the wear rates that I'm achieving across the test blocks, they can't emulate any particular person's cycling. What they are is a benchmark test. The lubricants are being put through the exact same tests. It's the exact same load. It is the same contamination applied in the same amounts at the same points throughout the blocks. And we're getting then a comparative performance result. So whilst your wear rates may be higher or lower, or your kilometers that you're achieving for a treatment lifespan may be higher or lower, the results shown in the data are obviously relative. So if you were, say for instance, getting nowhere near, for instance, the single application longevity for, let's say, Rex Black Diamond, as what I'm showing you that you should get in the table here for dry conditions or dry dust conditions cycling. If you were to go to a product that was, say, half of the longevity in the table, then you could expect that it's going to do, a somewhat similar outcome to you, where you would get, again, much less lifespan versus the Rex Black Diamond that you were using. So it is a relative performance comparison, and that's really what you want to take away. Very lastly, on the single application longevity, you can see, so I've sort of focused on this part. This is the two columns where we have adjusted, trying to give some sort of real world kilometers based on the test. The raw kilometers that we achieved on the machine are in the first two columns. So, like, for instance, say silca Synergy in dry road conditions, that test, just to get the chain to 0.1% wear, it took 9,400 kilometers basically to get the chain to reach 0.1% wear running on the machine. I just thought it was never going to end. We divide the raw machine kilometers by 3 to try to get some sort of relatable real-world kilometers, but again, I think in many instances this is still erring on the generous side. Things do move along more rapidly in contamination because contamination will start to accumulate and then continuously increase the wear rate that we're seeing for each check measure. And nothing is really going too long in the extreme conditions single application longevity test that is, sort of does, hammer the lubricants and the wear rates pretty quickly. But anyway, hopefully that all made some sense. Again, let me know. Oh, damn it, didn't quite keep to my 15 minutes, but I think I was about 22, so not massively far out. But yeah, again, let me know. Hopefully the explanation of what the data means and how to use it made sense. If not, let me have it so I can, again, look to try to do better on that at a future date. And also, if you want to know more about the actual test itself, then just have a look at the full test brief that is on the instructions tab that goes through the test block by block and what the correlations mean and initial penetration issues and everything. There are some other little bits of information that I do need to try to do an update to that document because I try to be as concise as possible for me. But there are some other little bits on there that I should probably add a bit of extra info in. So I'll do that when I can. But have a look there first if you want to know more, and still any questions, zing me through an email and I'll be able to answer those. Other than that, I may or may not be back next week with any little updates. But have a great weekend as always. Hopefully get some groovy cycling in if the weather is not too bad. And yeah, I will look forward to your comments and try to get to those as best I can during the week. All right, till next time.